Morning, everybody. The April 26, 2018 Veterans Land Board meeting will now come to order. First item on the agenda is approval of minutes from our last meeting on January 25th, 2018. After the board has had a chance to review the minutes and assuming no questions or comments, I could entertain a motion to confirm said minutes.
I'll move to confirm the minutes.
I'll second.
Motion is made, seconded, and carried unanimously to approve the minutes. Next item on the agenda is number 2 as stated.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Members, for the record, Rusty Martin, Chief Investment Officer. I'm surprised, Commissioner, that you don't want to read all of those bond issues listed in that agenda item. Just for the record, there are 25 of them listed there. Approval of this item is going to authorize the conversion of the above-listed outstanding bond series from their current index interest rate mode to a weekly interest rate mode. I'm going to throw a lot of technical terms at you. There's no way I can get around that, but I'll summarize it as briefly as I can. So between July and December of 2015, the board created a new index interest rate mode on about $1.3 billion of its outstanding tax-exempt 7-day variable rate demand bonds, which we call VRDBs. Of that amount, about $365 million of the total was placed directly with State Street Bank, and the remainder, about $945 million, was placed directly with Bank of America. Before the conversion, those bonds were publicly traded, and the interest rate on those bonds were reset weekly by a group of remarketing agents. After the conversion, the bonds are held privately by State Street and Bank of America, and the interest rate on the bonds are reset weekly based upon an index. So the conversion eliminated the need for the remarketing. It also eliminated the need for liquidity, because while they're in that index interest rate mode, the bonds don't require ongoing liquidity facilities in addition to no remarketing services. Now, at the time of the conversions, it was estimated that the transactions would generate approximately $7 million in savings over the combined life of the individual holding periods of the bonds. In addition, due to the fact that there were no liquidity facilities required, it also removed the need to negotiate extensions on existing facilities and to attract new liquidity facilities every 3 years or so, which is a normal cycle. The primary value that was derived by State Street and Bank of America from holding the bonds in that mode was realized through the tax exemption of interest on those bonds and a corporate tax rate of 35%. So you can probably see where I'm going with this. The tax bill that was passed in January 18th, 2018 reduced the corporate tax rate from 35% to 21%. Dramatic reduction, which dramatically reduced the value of the tax exemption to both of those institutions. Completely unanticipated at the time the transaction was entered into. The documents related to the bonds contain a make-whole provision, and that allows both State Street and Bank of America to offset the loss in value to them from a reduction in the corporate tax rate by effectively increasing the interest rates on those bonds. And analysis performed by our financial advisor, George K. Baum and Company, indicates that the application of that new margin rate factor on those bonds to the remaining life of the bonds would result in increased interest costs to the board of approximately $47 million over that period. After working with Baum to analyze various scenarios that were proposed by B of A and State Street, and I should put on the record that both of them were certainly well aware of the impact to us by those changes, and were very forthright and helpful in trying to find ways to mitigate the impact of those changes. After we went through all that analysis, though, it was determined that the most cost-effective solution for us is to convert all of those bonds back to their original weekly interest rate mode that was in place before we did the conversion. And if we do that, we expect to reduce that increased interest cost of $47 million down to $2 million. Of course, in addition to that, or in conjunction with that, we're going to have to find liquidity, replace the liquidity facilities that we terminated when we did the conversion. We have already arranged for that. Sumitomo is going to provide $250 million of the total liquidity over a 5-year period, and State Street is going to provide approximately $920 million of liquidity to cover the rest of the transaction over a 5 to 7 year period. I know that's a lot to think about. My recommendation is that the board approve the change in interest rates on the above described VO bond issues from their current index interest rate mode back to a weekly interest rate mode, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Any questions from the board at this time?
I don't have any questions.
Hey, is there any additional liquidity that's going to be required in the short term, or will those two organizations be able to provide enough?
Yeah, those facilities will kick in upon the conversion of the bonds. Until the conversion is accomplished, we will be paying at that increased margin rate factor that I talked about. The actual conversion right now is scheduled to take place over 4 different dates because those bonds were done in 4 different tranches, and they're callable on dates starting in July and going through December. So we're working now to see whether or not we can consolidate those into 1 transaction or 2 transactions, but there are a lot of moving parts. We have to get remarketing agents too, and there's a process involved in doing that. But we don't need the liquidity until the conversion happens.
Okay.
So what we have is adequate.
And to refresh my recollection, Rusty, in terms of the applicable component of the tax bill that reduces corporate rates, is that a permanent provision, or is that a temporary or provisional?
My understanding is that's a permanent provision, yes.
So theoretically, this would put us in a good position for at least a short, until there's a change in effective rates.
That's correct. Yeah. You know, as part of our analysis, we considered the possibility that there could be changes, you know, in the future, and that this could be rolled back. But the likelihood that that would happen, if it did happen, it would probably still be 3 or 4 years, and by then we'd be well towards the end of the period anyway. So we really feel like we need to take action now to mitigate this, and all things considered, considering the impact, $47 million, $2 million is not a bad price to have to pay. And also, the deal has been in effect for 2 years, so we've already recognized some savings, probably not $2 million, but probably at least $1 million in savings. So in the final analysis, it's going to look pretty much like a wash to us, except for the fact that we spent about 2 years developing this program and putting it in place. It was at that time the very first tax-exempt direct placement of that type. There had been several taxable issues done, but not a tax-exempt.
Excellent.
All motion?
I'll second.
Motion is made, approves, carries unanimously to approve the language submitted by Mr. Martin and the recommendation to the board. Next item on the agenda is number 3 as stated.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members. So the purpose of this item today is to discuss resident room rates in the David A. Gloyer Texas State Veterans Home Program. I've included a history of changes in resident room rates in the programs for roughly the last 10 or 11 years. And if you look at that chart, what you'll see is that since 2012, we have managed not to raise room rates in this program, which I think is, given the context of healthcare programs in this country, being able to hold cost constant for that period of time is really pretty remarkable. In addition, in 2016, you actually voted to reduce room rates, which we had never done before, and we were very happy and pleased to do that. Of course, the ability to keep those rates unchanged during that period are based on a number of factors, sustained high occupancy levels, which we still have, and in fact, the occupancy typically runs 95% or higher in these homes, successful cost containment, and certainly there's a robust per diem amount for VA veterans that are 70% or more service-connected disability, and all of those things contributed to a really healthy programmatic cash flow. However, over the past year, there are two things that happened that I think are going to alter the dynamics of those cash flows if we don't take some action. The first is there was an overall increase in management and operations fees paid to our third-party operators of approximately 2.92%. We'll call it 3%. That's a function of adding a new operator that had a higher cost structure than the previous existing sole operator, and then upon renegotiation of contracts with the existing operator, who was well aware of the increases to the other operator, their costs went up too. So that was a pretty important factor. The other factor is that the decision was made by the board to reserve basically most of the money in the surplus fund in the program to pay the expenses related to the construction of a vet home in Houston. So basically that reduces the previously existing cushion that the surplus fund provided against any potential operational expense increases or any dramatic unanticipated expenses in the program. So to counteract that negative impact of those two things, I am going to recommend that the board increase resident room rates in the homes for the period beginning June 1, running through May of 2019. I've attached a schedule to the memo that has all of the rate increases. Rather than go through each one of them one by one, I can summarize it pretty easily. If you look at the blue section on the right, what you'll see is that we're proposing raising the semi-private rates by $4 a day, the private rates by $8 a day, and then in the Tyler home, which has a different structure completely, we're recommending a $10 increase across the board there. And I want to put in, so the overall projected increase is about 1.93%. But I want to put some things in perspective for you when we're considering this raise. And first of all, every fall, the vet home staff here does an ad hoc survey of private nursing home rates in the state. And while that survey is only anecdotal, the results really provide important information when comparing room rate structures in our homes to those at private facilities across the state. And the results indicate that after considering the VA per diem rate that the non-70% veterans receive, which currently averages about $104 a day, the daily room rate that's charged in our home still is significantly lower than the average of the surveyed facilities. For example, the survey indicated that the average room rate across the state for a semi-private room is about $150 per day. In comparison, if you consider the $104 per day that the VA per diem provides veterans in our semi-private rooms, that reduces their proposed fee from $147, which is what I'm proposing, down to $43. So they're paying $43 a day to be in the home. The average across the state is $150. On top of that, our rate includes their medications, which is not included in that $150. So it's still a remarkably good bargain, no matter how you look at it. And another piece of information that I did not put in the memo, but I certainly want to highlight that, is that average per diem that I mentioned that the veterans receive. It varies from home to home, and it varies from veteran to veteran. So last year, that average was about $100 a day. So when you take that into consideration, and we're proposing for semi-private veterans to raise the rate $4 a day, it looks like a rate increase to them, but actually the amount they're receiving from the VA has gone up about $4 per day too. So for some portion of the population, the increase is going to be a wash net. They will see an increase in their rates, but they may not necessarily see an increase or a decrease in the money that's coming out of their pockets. So I'm recommending that the board increase resident room rates in the homes for the period from June 1 through May 2019, according with the schedule that I've attached to the memo, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Rusty, when we approved the nursing home in Houston, and part of that was a depletion of that cushion, can you remind me, did we authorize the complete removal of that cushion? What is the cushion? We used to have a cushion, and I understand that a few months ago, we authorized that home in Houston, and that
Yes.
required us to use those funds.
Yes.
And
The
are those
requirements,
funds completely used up?
no.
Okay.
No, because, first of all, the required amount that we were going to have to pay was about $19.7 million for the home. The the surplus fund at that time was about $20 million. But also, you have to remember that we're not paying it out all at once. So it comes out every month. We pay construction expenses. So it's depleting as the home is constructed. Right now, backing out everything that we have left to pay on the home, and discounting the potential for any unanticipated expenses that may come up, we have a little bit over $1 million in a cushion now in the surplus fund.
But the remainder of that will be depleted as the project goes on.
The $1 million should not be.
Okay.
It should start growing after the project is completed.
Okay.
So that should be the
I got you.
bottom line for the surplus fund is that $1 million or so that's in there now that's extra. It will start growing. And this increase includes some component to contribute to the surplus fund also. It's not just to cover the increases. It also takes into account replenishing the surplus fund.
I see. Okay.
Is there an expectation, Rusty, under point 1 in terms of significant events that occurred which have altered dynamics of future expected programmatic cash flow, that there will be additional increase from the third-party operators? Because if I recall from the brief, that there was a significant increase, and I forgot if there's a contemplated further increase from where we're at right now with our operators.
I fully expect that they will be asking for more money next year, yes. We review it every year with them, and the increase that was requested was significantly higher than the increase that was finally negotiated and agreed to, significantly. Yeah, I expect every year, so far, it's been like that. You know, we hold the line. We always approach it, the negotiations, such that the end result is we don't increase rates. That's our goal. And that will continue to be our goal.
What is the population currently in the homes that will be put in the position where they can no longer stay in the homes because of this rate increase?
I wouldn't think that there would really be, and maybe at the margins there may be some, because when I say the average VA per diem is $104 a day, and there are some places where it's high as $107 a day, and there's some places where it's under $100 a day. So there could be some at the margins where it would have an impact, but I just don't think on an overall basis, because what is the other alternative? They're going to have to go into another home where they may not get the same kind of benefit,
Right.
or they're going to have to go to, a private home. So when you consider the average cost to what, the semi-private room veteran is going to be $43 a day versus $150 a day, I just don't think there's going to be much of a factor.
Yeah, I mean, I think you bring up a great explanation when it comes to the VA per diem. and the fact that that's increasing over time. And so even with a small rate increase, net out-of-pocket costs may be a wash for those veterans. I think, though, that we do need to be very careful in the future about taking rate decreases, because that could ultimately put us in the position where we do have to raise rates. So just when it comes to that churn, maintaining the current rate, knowing that long-term with additional operating costs, we should keep that in the back of our minds going forward.
Yeah, point well taken.
But that doesn't mean we shouldn't evaluate it and also make sure that, that we afford the best service, the best price to our veterans.
Yeah, I agree with that.
All right, all motion.
I'll second.
Motion is made second and carries unanimously to approve item number 3. Next item on the agenda is number 4.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members. This is an agenda item that we put on the agenda at each meeting, not necessarily an action item, and today I'm not recommending any action, but I just wanted to briefly give you an update on the housing program. Since you recall, we had to replace the administrator in the program last year, and we have done that. We have 2 administrators now. They are both in place and have been in place roughly since October of last year. I'm happy to report at the last board meeting, I told you that we were had recovered to about 75% of what I consider normal demand in the program, which is around $50 million a month or $600 million a year. The rate lock issuance, which we keep an eye on very closely now, is indicating that we're back to around 95% of normal over the past 7 months. So I'm very happy to tell you about that. So I'm not recommending any changes at this time. I have some other numbers in the page that you have that I'm happy to answer any questions on. The only other one I would really point out is that the average loan size for the first 7 months of this year is averaged about $276,000, which is significantly higher than it was in fiscal year 17 at $261,000. Probably that has something to do with the increase in the maximum loan amount that you approved earlier this year. Other than that, I'm not recommending any changes. I think the program is healthy and almost back to 100%. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Any questions at the time from the board?
No questions?
None.
Great to hear. This being a non-action item, next item on the agenda is number 5.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members. This is also a non-action item. This is a quarterly investment report for the period ended December 31st. I'll just give you a brief kind of update on economic and market conditions, and then we'll talk about the portfolio a little bit. In the fourth quarter, U.S. GDP increased at 2.9%. That was actually, it's a great number, but it's actually a little less than it was in third quarter, which was 3.2%. Consensus for 2018 looks like around 2.8%. So that's pretty much in line with what we should expect for this year. The unemployment rate ended the quarter at 4.1%, and I believe consensus expectations for this year are between 3.9 and 4%. So the FOMC has had a lot of attention, as it should, because it's been pretty clear about its intention to implement a regime of Fed fund rate increases, and it's already started that process. And in fact, at its December meeting, it once again raised the Fed funds level by 25 basis points, the target range. It had been 1% to 1.25%, and they raised it to 1.25% to 1.5%. And they had some interesting comments, too. They had already announced that they were going to begin a balance sheet normalization program. And basically what that means is it concerns the reinvestment of money from its holdings in mortgage-backed securities and the rolling over at auction of maturing Treasury securities. So they had been very aggressive about reinvesting money in all of those things. But beginning in October of last year, they began rolling over at auction the amount of maturing Treasuries only that exceeded $6 billion a month, and reinvesting in mortgage-backed securities the amount of principal prepayments from their holdings only to the extent that exceeded $4 billion a month. So they've tweaked that in December some more, which is going to add to the tightening effect of interest rate increases. And what they did was they basically doubled those thresholds. So now they've increased the reinvestment threshold from maturing Treasury securities from $6 billion a month to $12 billion a month, and they doubled the mortgage-backed securities from $4 billion to $8 billion. So that fits in line with their tightening program, and all of these things are going to have an effect at some point. They've also they expect that conditions are going to evolve in a manner that warrants only gradual increases in the Fed funds rate, but they've been very clear that they are going to continue this path of increases. And I fully expect that over the next year, we will see 75 to 100 basis points more of increases, and that's if inflation doesn't pick up. And we will see if inflation picks up or not, but it's getting pretty close to their 2% kind of equilibrium target now. As far as the portfolio is concerned, business as usual. You know, we focus primarily on providing liquidity and cash flow to meet continued loan purchase demands and debt service requirements, and only secondarily on maximizing total return. We're more interested in preserving the principle of these investments. Our targeted duration was about 3.5 to 4 years. We ended the year at 4.22 years, down from 4.5 years. As I said, the economy is expanding, is continuing to expand. Consensus is 2.8% on GDP for 2018. And the FOMC has committed to a continuing series of rate increases for the near future. We will continue to monitor those conditions and make adjustments if necessary in our approach. Turning to page that has the tail, page 3, has the performance information. Just point out to, if you look at table 2, the return for the quarter on the portfolio was 0.31%. The benchmark actually had a loss during that period. The benchmark was down 9 basis points. So the 1-year total return on the portfolio was 2.16%, and that compares to a 0.56% return on the benchmark. The yield to maturity at the end of the quarter was 2.09% versus 1.74 on the benchmark. And then at the bottom I have some historical numbers that have been updated to include the this annual return. And just to highlight, you can see that the portfolio, even though we're not a completely total return oriented or targeted portfolio, portfolio has handily beat the benchmark over any period you want to look at, 3 years, 5 years, 10 years since inception. In fact, since inception, the average total return on the portfolio is about 3.4% versus 2.4 on the benchmark, so 100 basis points. Again, this is a non-action item. I'm happy to answer any questions you might have.
Any questions from the board at this time?
No questions.
Thank you, Rusty. This being a non-action item, next item on the agenda is number 6.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. For the record, my name is Charlotte Mumford. There are no appeals before the board today.
This being a non-voting item, next on the agenda is number 7.
There were 9 tracts offered during the forfeited land sale online bidding period of March the 6th, 2018 through April 24th, 2018. We received 128 bids, resulting in 9 high bids. Staff is requesting that the board award all high bids that meet qualifications for the land program. I will be happy to answer any questions you may have.
Any questions from the board?
Hey, just one question. How many of those are minimum bids versus, tracts of land that had multiple bids on them?
I can get that information for you. There's a detail. I think you guys received an additional page that has the outline of the bids that we received.
Okay.
How many bids on each tract?
Okay, I am seeing that. I apologize.
No worries.
Is that, as a follow-up to Grant's question, is that bid preference, is that the number that indicates how many bids there were?
That is. That's how many bids were received on each tract and the amount of each bid received.
Do the bidders know what the minimum bid is?
Yes, they do.
They do? Huh. All right. It's just a lot that, a lot of one bids that aren't bidding the minimum, so, but, got it.
Yes, they do have a minimum bid amount is posted.
Okay, great.
Any further questions from the board?
No.
Could entertain a motion to approve staff recommendation.
All motion?
I'll second.
Motion is made, seconded, and carries unanimously to approve item number 7. Next item on the agenda is number 8.
Staff is requesting the board take forfeiture action on the resolution before you, except accounts where sufficient funds are received to avoid that action. 5 accounts are being presented for action today. I will be happy to answer any questions you may have.
No questions?
No questions.
All motion?
I'll second.
Motion is made, seconded, and carries unanimously to approve item number 8. Next item on the agenda is number 9.
Staff is requesting the board take action on the resolution before you. The resolution lists accounts to be considered for ordered for sale action. These 7 accounts will become the tracks for the next forfeited land sale. We're requesting the board's authority to pull any account that fully reinstates prior to the sale date. I will be happy to answer any questions you may have.
No questions? All motion?
I'll second.
Motion is made, seconded, and carries unanimously to approve item number 9. Next item on the agenda is number 10.
Staff is requesting the board set the next quarterly electronic forfeited land sale bidding period to begin June the 4th, 2018, with the bidding deadline of July the 24th, 2018 at 5 p.m.
I'll motion.
Second?
Motion is made, seconded, and carries unanimously to approve item number 10. Thank you. Next item on the agenda is number 11, construction update.
Good morning. My name's Uli Flotis. I'm project manager with the construction services program area. I'm here on behalf of Jeff Kaufman, who could not make it today. As you can probably see on the handouts, the home construction is going real well. There's some aerial shots, and the first one's just a perspective of the ultimate project. The MLK roadway and access road, the utilities, that project's about 99% complete. All utilities have been provided to the site. The vet home itself is about 25% complete. We recovered well from Harvey, and we're estimating construction completion February 2019, and move in probably early summer. Site work is about 75% complete. Utility work, about the same. Foundations, as you can see on the pictures, about 95% complete. Structural steel is about 60% complete. And that's a summary of where we are. If you have any questions.
Financially still staying
Still
on
the same.
time and under budget?
We haven't had, we had one change order that we had to add a ring road that was not in the original design, but that one has been covered. There hasn't been anything significant that we need to, cover at this time.
I like the ring road. I think it looks nice. At least on this.
We're going to continue to take the same kind of aerial shots. There's more than those two as we progress with construction, and we're going to compile once a month and hopefully, have for the ribbon cutting, have a compilation of from the beginning to where it's built to the final completion.
Awesome. Is that sufficient parking?
I believe so, sir. Yeah, it was designed to meet all codes and all, state requirements, VA guidelines, TDADS, Department of Aging. So,
All right.
it's all good.
Are there any challenges or anything that we can help with? Or
The rain, if you can keep the rain from,
I don't know.
there are
About
some delays with the rain, but we built some weather days and some float into the project. We did have to extend the project about 45 days because of Harvey. That's the big setback. But other than that, the rain, it just kind of, I think it's created problems up to now. Foundation work, once you get everything in place and it rains, it creates a lot of havoc. But once we get it, roofed in, if you will, it should go pretty fast. And so, yeah, they're cranking. They're trying to make up a little bit of time. Contractor doesn't want to be there any more than they have to. So I think once we close everything in, the rain days are not going to be as big a problem because they can still work inside. But that's a major challenge.
look forward to seeing it.
Yes.
Any other questions at this time?
Thank you.
Thank you very much for the update. This being a non-action item, we can move on to the next item, number 12, the naming of the home.
Morning, Mr. Chairman, members. My name is Ken Wallingford. I'm the Senior Advisor to the Executive Secretary. And Commissioner Bush, want to give our condolences to you on the loss of your grandmother. To you and your family is very well noted. Thank you.
Thank you.
In the spring of 1999, the Veterans Land Board adopted a policy, which you have a copy in your packets, for naming the state veterans' homes in honor of a distinguished Texas veterans. On February the 1st of this year, Chairman Bush sent letters, which you have a copy of solicitation to county veteran service officers, veteran organizations, veteran leaders, local elected officials, state representatives, senators, the governor, lieutenant governor, Speaker of the House, U.S. congressmen from the Harris County area, and both U.S. senators. The deadline for submission of nominations was on March 31st of this year. The State Veterans Home Naming Committee met on April the 10th via a conference call. Members present were Bill West, who is the Department Adjutant of the American Legion, Roy Grona, who is the Department Adjutant for the Veterans of Foreign Wars, Tom Palladino, the Executive Secretary of the Texas Veterans Commission, Mark Havens, Chief Clerk of the General Land Office, Matt Elledge, the Executive Secretary, and myself. Teresa Jonigan, who is the Department Adjutant for the Disabled American Veterans, was unavailable, but did submit her choices by email prior to the meeting. Also in the meeting was John Berkeley, the Deputy Director of the State Veterans Home Program, as a non-voting member. 4 nominations were received. And it was noted that one of the 4 nominations that we received was technically submitted after the deadline and secondly, did not have the required DD 214 with the application. The committee ranked the remaining nominations 1 through 3, with 1 being your top choice, second, and then third choices. You have biographical information in your packets. The top choice by the majority vote of the committee is Richard A. Anderson. Lance Corporal Anderson, USMC, was posthumously awarded the Medal of Honor for action at Quang Tri Province, Republic of Vietnam, 24 August of 1969. The second choice is Norris A. Merchant. Mr. Merchant, U.S. Army, was a World War II veteran, received the Purple Heart and Bronze Star Medal. The third choice, Mr. Charles Drisdale. Mr. Drisdale was a U.S. Army veteran of the Korean War. State Veterans Home Naming Committee presents their report for board consideration and action. I'll be happy to take any questions you might have.
I was just thinking, Mr. Wall, first of all, thank you for the brief. I think it's incredible that we've assembled a great committee to assess the different applications that came in and nominations. So I need to put that on the record, but I'm just curious, in our other homes, if we utilize the same process, if we recognize the second and third nominations as well and honor their service as well, in addition to the incredible, assuming the board moves forward on selecting this name, to have the home entitled for Mr. Anderson, if number 2 and number 3 would also be honored as well, and if that's a common practice in other homes.
That's a good question, Commissioner. I know you all are new to this process. The last time we did this was about 6 years ago in Tyler. When we started this whole process with the State Vet Home Program and naming, we generally went for one name, if there was no question about the nominee's credentials, if you will. For example, the Temple home was named after William Courtney, a World War II veteran. The Floresville home was named after Frank Tejeda, former state rep and senator from Vietnam. Bonham was named after Clyde Cosper, a World War II veteran. The Big Spring home is where we ran into our first challenge, if you will. The committee, and there were, and it's interesting on the nominations, gentlemen, that Temple, we received 2 nominations during that process. Tyler, we received 10. Temple, like I said, 2. McAllen, 11. El Paso, 18. Floresville received 1 nomination. Bonham, 3. Big Springs, 8. And Amarillo, 6. So when we got to Big Spring, the committee could not, there was, out of the 8 nominations, the committee could not separate the top 2 choices. They were so close. They was based on their military service. And so the committee made the recommendation to the board. Of course, you have the ultimate decision to amend and approve what the committee recommends. So the committee recommended 2 names. During that board meeting, there was an individual, and of course, in an open meeting session, a gentleman wanted to be recognized, and basically made a passionate plea to the board for his wife's cousin, I believe it was, to be considered adding to that name. The board took that testimony and decided to amend our recommendation, and instead of 2 names, we added 3 names. After that, a former chief clerk said, if we can in the future, let's try and keep it to 1 name, as our original intent was, unless you run into situations like we did in El Paso, was just 1 name, Ambrosian Guion, who was a Medal of Honor recipient from Korea. McAllen is Alfredo Gonzalez, Medal of Honor from Vietnam. Amarillo was our next situation where not only were we going to recommend a deceased Medal of Honor recipient, Mr. Roan, from World War II, but also we had just lost a former VLB board member, Mike Usry. Mr. Usry was from the Amarillo area. He was very instrumental in getting the home there in Amarillo, and so the board felt it was very appropriate to not only have Mr. Roan's name added, but also to include Mr. Usry's name as well, which we did. The last one, Tyler, really got down to the top 2, well, top 2 choices were Medal of Honor recipients. And so to answer your question, Commissioner, we've tried to keep it at 1 name unless there was extenuating circumstances where you had maybe 2 Medal of Honor recipients or two people you couldn't separate. Board amended the committee's recommendation, added a third name. There is a provision in our policy that if an individual's name is not accepted as the namesake of the home, each of the halls in these homes by resident council of the members in the homes can name a hall after an individual, whether it's not necessarily a name that's been submitted for naming of the home, but maybe a name that the residents have chosen amongst themselves. So,
And perhaps that may be the, best path forward for this particular home, assuming we move forward with Mr. Anderson and honor his record and his service to this great country, that there's also recognition for the other nominees that made it through a pretty difficult vetting process, and were distinguished patriots in their own right. But that provides, really good context in terms of how we can also honor other individuals.
yes, sir.
Any other questions from the
I
board?
appreciate the history, though. It was good. No questions. I'll move to, I'll motion to name this after Mr. Anderson.
As a proud Marine, I'll second it.
Well, we do have a couple other Marines named after our homes and so forth, so duly noted, sir.
My eye was drawn to that, though, just so you know, the other two Army guys.
Thank you for that. Motion is made, seconded, and carries unanimously to approve item number 12. Thank you, Ms. Wamford. Item number 13.
Anthony Vargas, Office of General Counsel. I don't think we actually got a second on the record. Can we get that?
I think he proudly, after he said his Semper Fi language and all that, Mr. Marcus, Counsel, his Marine language.
There's the Navy
Item
taking
number
cheap shots again.
13 will be, on that note, in executive session, and we'll enter session pursuant to Chapter 551, Subchapter D, Texas Government Code, Section 551, Tech 071, Subsection 2, for consultation with Mr. Vargas and regarding legal issues raised in connection with awarding a potential contract. Following closed session, we will reconvene in open session. The open session of the April 26, 2018 Veterans Land Board meeting will now resume with item number 13.
Morning, Mr. Chairman, members. Before you today is the recommendation to award
Anthony,
contract.
you need to introduce yourself for the record.
Thank you, sir. Anthony Vargas, Office of General Counsel, for the record. Before you today is a recommendation to award a contract to Derrick Construction for the removal and disposal of scrap tires located in Coryell County, a VLB-owned tract. If you'll recall from the January VLB meeting, the board voted to issue a provisional notice of award to Derrick Construction contingent upon successful contract negotiations per terms discussed in executive session of that meeting. Subsequently, we did engage Derrick, and we did explore some possibilities for cost savings. Derrick Construction recently submitted a revised bid in the amount of $2,899,000. If you'll recall, their previous bid was $3,396,000. So they've come down approximately $500,000 in the bid. They've explored cost-saving options and found some areas that they can save, and have submitted this revised bid. So the recommendation to the board today is to vote on awarding the contract with a not-to-exceed amount of $2.899 million, contingent on the fact that we will continue to explore cost savings, including if our estimate of the tires is higher than the actual amount on site, that we would build a mechanism into the contract to have pricing reflect the actual amount of tires.
I will motion.
I'll second.
Motion is made, seconded, and carried unanimously to approve item number 13. Thank you, Mr. Vargas. Final item on the agenda is a staff report for second quarter Veterans Land Housing and Home Improvement Program production update.
For the record, I'm Bill McLemore, the Deputy Director of the Loan Programs and Assistant to the Executive Secretary of the VLB. This is a non-action item. Staff report to present an update for the VLB's loan program production for the first half of fiscal year 18. The report shows a comparison of current FY18 loan program production to the same time for the past fiscal year, FY17. As such, it reflects a slight slowdown, 13 to 14%, in market demand for all programs except the housing loan program for the first half of this fiscal year. The report also shows a 17% decrease in loan production for both land and home improvement. This decrease is partly attributed to the decrease in market demand, but also we had some staffing recidivism resulting in reduced land and home improvement production capability during the FY18 period. We believe both issues are now resolved. We're back on track to achieve the FY18 annual production goals. For housing loan production, the good news is that with investment manager Rusty Martin's good help and leadership, the successful transition to start the new fiscal year with a new housing loan administrator, Gateway, and a housing loan master servicer, NationStar, has resulted in almost immediate 232% increase in loans purchased and a 260% increase in the dollar value of those loans over the 2017 transition period. So board members, this completes my report. Do you have any questions?
So all in land, VHIP, and VHAP, still an increase based upon this report from
Correct.
from fiscal year 17.
On land?
On all in, so land,
On all
VHIP, and
programs, that's
VHAP.
correct.
Kind of a blended.
Yes, sir.
average, if you will. Any other
No questions.
questions?
No.
This being a non-voting item, thank you, Mr. McLemore. And there being no further business before the board that I'm aware of, this meeting is hereby adjourned.